me ambush you with something that was a total surprise to me as well. I've got Brett with the P7 Pro program. Can I call it a P7 Pro program project? The HK P7. I had a P7. I had several P7s actually. Miss them. I'd love to see them come back, but even if they did, not really pragmatic, right? 40 ounces, capacity's limited, manual of arms not that great. But we have something today, a project you've been working on that to me is frickin' mind-blowing. We have the P7 in a way coming back, but coming back better than ever. Did I say that correctly, Brett?
I think so. A lot of effort's been put on sort of addressing some of the concerns you mentioned about the P7 series, and then really modernizing it and updating it to make it more applicable in a modern program. I mean, it was designed in the late 70s, right? So there's a lot of things to be updated on it. And so along those lines, this is the M13 Slim, but this going into production later this quarter. So this again has 7068 aluminum. Without the magazine, it is 1 pound, 4 ounces, which is actually lighter than a G19. So even though it's a mostly metal gun, it's lighter than a G19. And the contour on the back strap is significantly different. So you can actually, it has a lower bore axis because you can actually ride your hand up significantly higher. And then the radius of curvature on the back is much slimmer. So the whole gun is less than 1 inch wide, but it carries the M13 double stack magazine. So it's like a fully updated P7 versus just cloning the P7 like the previous ones were. The entire area underneath here has been remachined to where the heat buildup is not remotely the same. So the thing where if you run it at a range, if you run like 2, 3, 4 mags continuously, you're gonna have to set it down. I know a lot of P7 owners own 2 just so they can swap back and forth at the range, and that sort of eliminates this because the heat buildup is just a completely different profile now because it's been optimized specifically around the understanding of the heat transfer problems of the original series.
This is 1 pound, 4 ounces, right?
Correct. So with the magazine out, it's 1 pound, 4 ounces, but it's basically an all metal gun, obviously with polymer grips. And it has, other than that, it's got a lot of the same specs. There is no fluted chamber on the updated models. I've reproduced the barrels and I have fluted chamber options. But after doing a whole lot of testing on these, I've found that actually without a fluted chamber, number one, it makes the gun less dirty. And the P7, when it gets dirty, you have to clean it pretty regularly, and also it actually makes the recoil slightly lighter because the gas mechanism that locks it in place. Now there's no leaking flutes on the side to actually keep it from to actually let it go rearward, and so it actually makes the recoil slightly lighter because it retards the slide a little better.
Sure. One thing that worried me, you said it takes P7M13 magazines. Literally have to sell an organ to get those. What are we going to do about that?
So. As of right now, the only tooling that H&K still owns, actually, for the P7 series, is actually the stamp tooling for the mags. H&K still does drops of the magazines, including the old Euro-style P7s, P7M8s, and M13s. So as of right now, between the original market of like some PD stockpiles, as well as new production, they still do make. These are factory mags that come with it. Now, I understand that ultimately, as this scales up, there might need to be a need to look into modern tooling and domesticated tooling versus importing them in from Germany. But as of right now, I have been able to source, at least in some reasonable quantities, HK mags.
I needed to bring that up because, that can kill a project, right?
Absolutely.
If the magazines are $200 each. So to rehash everything, you're talking about a gun that isn't just cool like the P7 was, but you're talking about a gun that's got some pragmatic value. 3 ounces lighter than a Glock 19, sounds like, if I got that right.
Yep.
It's less than 1 inch thick. Talk to me about parts compatibility, though. Is this part, not that it matters, it isn't like people are sitting on a bunch of P7 parts. I just imagine the viewers out there want to know, like, hey man, how true of a P7 is this?
So actually all the parts are compatible. So the reason why I started off making P7s was because I used to carry a P7 for years, and people started retiring them because they literally just can't find spare parts, because it's a 40-year-old platform at this point. And so even though I've updated a lot of this stuff, these are still backwards compatible, / they share parts commonality with the P7. I've made some changes, like obviously you're not going to find an aluminum framed factory HK P7, et cetera, but the small parts are backwards compatible.
How's it shoot, Brett?
It actually shoots surprisingly soft. When I took it to the range prior to this, I was concerned with it being super light, that it was actually going to, I was going to trade off the really soft recoil of the P7 now with being a little snappier. But because of the lack of the flutes and the fact that your hand rides quite a bit higher on the grip now, I was actually surprised. To me, it shot almost the equivalent of a steel gun. So this is an M13 prototype. This was actually prototype number 1. And so this is all 7068 aluminum on the frame, and then the domestic made slides, domestic made frame. But this had a wider backstrap angle, and the bore axis is still the same as the factory P7. So this is a titanium limited edition of the original Euro model. So this actually has the factory, the heel mag release like the original police issue, but it is a grade 5 titanium frame with obviously a Picatinny rail because there's a light on it, and then with a mix of basically American and then OEM German parts on there. I've also completely redesigned the gas block area. So everybody who shoots a P7 knows if you run like 3 or 4 mags through it, it starts to get a little toasty if you do continuous shooting. This one I ran 80 rounds through it continuously, and it felt like a normal, it felt like a USP or like a VP9. Like the heat transfer on it all goes up into the barrel area, and because the aluminum and all the material is cut out, there really was not a lot of heat buildup around the trigger guard, which historically is one of the big things that people complain about with the P7.
Yeah. This is a project that really pumps me up, which is why I want to know when's it going to come out and how much is it going to cost?
So I am expecting at least the first editions to come out later this quarter in Q1, and I do have some pre-orders, et cetera, that are sitting around 3. With my final machining prices, my MSRP is probably going to be in the mid-3s, like 35, 36. But I'm ultimately planning to bring the P7 back into full production, so I'm constantly looking at, as I scale this up, I can start bringing these prices down.
I imagine you're going to be pretty successful. I think at that price point, of course, 80% of the TFB TV viewership just went typical James Reeves. We got a $3,000 Gucci-ass handgun here on TFB TV Showtime. But the other 20% are like, oh shit, I'm in. If you were ever a P7 guy, you weren't scoffing at a $3,000 price tag on, again, adjusted for $25.
Yep.
In fact, I don't know, maybe we'll run the math. This might even be cheaper in present day dollars than the original P7M13 was 20 years ago.
If you run the inflation calculator, like if you just go on Google, you will find that HK advertised it as being the most expensive production gun ever, and there's a reason for that. At the time, back before custom 2011 world, it was an expensive gun, and if you actually inflation adjust it, these are actually like in the same ballpark.
In this world where people are selling staccatos for whatever, $4,000, $4 grand, at the end of the day, that's really not that bad, especially for something that you could practically conceal carry. And, as they refer to it, it's kind of a barbecue gun, right? It's cool to show your buddies. But Brett, thank you so much. I really appreciate you showing me and all the viewers TFB TV, the P7 Pro. I'm hoping this works out for you. Honestly, this is something I'm super pumped about. One of the coolest guns I've seen shot. I'm not just saying that because the camera's rolling. Guys, I really appreciate you checking out TFB TV. Make sure you stay tuned. We're bringing you more from SHOT Show 2025.